Welcome back to Lying Around with Earl, where we bring stories to life, one chapter at a time. Today, we continue with Chapter 10 of Banjo Strings and Anvil Rings. Chapter 10, Alice. The barn was alive with energy, the sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and stomping feet blending into a joyful cacophony. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm, flickering light across the hay-strewn floor. The rich smell of freshly cut hay mingled with the aroma of fried chicken and pies, giving the barn an air of celebration. Outside, crickets provided their own subtle rhythm, blending with the music in a harmony unique to the valleys of West Virginia. It was late September, the tail end of summer. The days were still warm, but the evenings carried a faint crispness, hinting at the fall to come. The fields surrounding the barn were quiet now, their rows harvested, the golden stalks trimmed low. The farmers who worked those fields now gathered here, their faces flushed with laughter and drink, their burdens momentarily set aside in favor of music and camaraderie. Alice Stevens stood near the edge of the dance floor, her brown eyes wide as she took it all in. At just 16, this was her first time attending a dance in Petroleum. The barn's size and the crowd's energy felt overwhelming but also exhilarating. Her petite frame was dwarfed by the swirl of activity around her. She tugged at the sleeve of her dress. A modest blue cotton one her sister Grace had insisted brought out the warmth in her eyes. "Stop fidgeting," Grace whispered from beside her, her auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a simple bonnet. Grace carried herself with calm confidence, her hands, strong and calloused from years of farm work, resting lightly on her hips. Alice sighed, smoothing the skirt nervously. "I feel like everyone's staring." Grace gave her a knowing look, her tone gentle but firm. "They're staring because you're pretty, not because they're remembering schoolyard taunts. Forget those old names, Alice." Alice nodded, though her hand briefly brushed over her strawberry blonde braid. The memories of being called Carrot Top and worse still lingered. She was young enough to feel the sting of past ridicule but determined to rise above it. Tonight, she resolved to push those thoughts aside and enjoy herself. Nearby, Grace adjusted a basket she'd brought with her, filled with bottles of her homemade tonics. As much as she'd come to enjoy the music and see Alice step into her own, Grace had also come prepared to help where she could. She knew these gatherings often stretched late into the night, and the men, particularly those dipping into the moonshine table, would need a little extra care to see them through. "Grace," a woman called from the refreshments table, her voice cutting through the din, "is that one of your remedies?" Grace turned, a small smile playing at her lips. "Just a tonic for those who've had too much fun," she replied dryly, holding up one of the bottles. The women laughed, but a few stepped closer, their curiosity piqued. "What's in it?" one asked, eyeing the amber liquid. "Goldenrod and mint for headaches, a little ginger to settle the stomach, and honey to make it go down easier," Grace explained. Her voice carried a mix of authority and practicality, her reputation as a healer well known among the community. "Will it work for my husband?" another woman asked with a grin, nodding toward a man who was already laughing too loudly at the moonshine table. "It'll help more than whatever he's drinking now," Grace quipped, her tone light but good-natured. Alice watched the exchange, marveling at how effortlessly Grace navigated these situations. Her older sister's calm demeanor and quiet competence seemed to put everyone at ease. As Grace handed off a bottle to one of the women, Alice felt a pang of pride. But her attention soon drifted back to the music. The band was playing a lively tune, the kind that made it impossible to stand still. Alice's gaze lingered on the musicians, her curiosity piqued. This band wasn't from Petroleum. She'd heard whispers earlier about them traveling all the way from Elizabeth. The band's chemistry was undeniable. Moe's steady hand strummed the guitar, Fidelas stood tall with his upright bass, and Early's fiddle moved with precision, the notes crisp and clear. But it was Curley, his banjo perched just right and a cocky grin plastered across his face, who stole the show. His dark eyes scanned the crowd, his grin playful as though he were sharing a private joke with everyone. "Who do you think they are?" Alice whispered to Grace. "I heard someone call them the Whitfield boys," Grace replied, keeping one eye on her basket as another neighbor wandered over. "Well, at least two of them. I suppose the others must be friends. They're good." Alice nodded, watching as Curly leaned down to say something to Mo during a pause in the song. The man next to Curly, Curly, judging by what they'd overheard, adjusted the strings on his fiddle with the calm precision of someone deeply attuned to his craft. Curly hopped down from the platform during the break, weaving through the crowd with ease. Alice's heart thudded in her chest when she realized he was heading in their direction. She tried to appear nonchalant, but her fingers twisted the edge of her shawl nervously. "Evening," Curly said as he stopped in front of them, his grin as bright as the lantern light. "Don't think I've seen you two before. Name's Curley Whitfield." His eyes flicked between them with open curiosity. Grace, always composed, stepped in first. "We're not from around here, either. I'm Grace Stevens, and this is my sister, Alice." Curly tipped his hat slightly. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Stevens. Miss Alice, you enjoying the music?" Grace smiled politely. "It's lively. You all play together often." Curly nodded, his grin widening. "We've been at it a while. That's my brother Early on the fiddle, Emo on guitar, and Fidelos with the bass. And of course, I'm the one keeping it all together with the banjo." "Is that so?" Grace replied, her tone polite but dry. Alice, emboldened by her sister's composure, found herself studying Curly more closely. There was an ease about him that made her both curious and wary. "You're far from home," she said quietly. "Elizabeth's a good bit away." Curly's grin didn't falter. "We don't mind the trip for a good crowd. Besides, new faces make it all the more interesting." Alice blushed faintly at his words, though she quickly tried to brush it off. "Well, you've certainly brought the energy. I don't think I've seen so many people dancing in one place." "That's the goal," Curly said with a wink. "Say, do either of you dance?" Grace opened her mouth to respond, but Curly's gaze had already shifted to Alice. "How about you, Miss Alice? Care to give it a try?" Alice hesitated, glancing at Grace, who nodded encouragingly. "Go on," Grace said softly. "It's just a dance." Finally, Alice placed her hand in his. "Just one," she said firmly. "One's all I need," Curly replied, leading her onto the floor. And that was Chapter 10 of Banjo Strings and Anvil Rings. If you love storytelling and history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a chapter. See you next time.